Great. So welcome to this winning resume and cover letter workshop. Please mute unless you're speaking. Otherwise, you can put questions in the chat as we go, or you can save them until the end. Or if you want to raise your hand, if it's a vital question for timing, feel free to do that. And otherwise, off we go. Just to let you know, I am Cindy Peck, the director of the Career Strategy Office for Drucker. Deborah Naspak is our associate director. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but she's also available to help. And Sweta Patel is also on this call. She is our graduate assistant and is a vital part of our office and communications and technology and everything great. So thanks, Sweta, for being here today as well. Our office is here to help you through coaching and workshops and events so you can attain your career goals. And so we'll talk about those a little bit at the end and have some ways to connect with us, but just wanted to introduce you to our team. Our agenda for today is that we are going to be looking at resumes, cover letters, and CVs, what to include, give some examples, and really just kind of cover the basics of foundations for getting your resume in tip-top shape. And I love this quote: "A strong resume communicates your qualifications and sets you up for career success." And that is so true, because without that, you can't really convey all that experience and the skill sets that you have properly. All right, so we're going to start off with this quick poll. Sweta, if you would go ahead and launch that poll. If everyone would answer this real quick, I just want to know, when is the last time that you worked on your resume? Everyone will just have a couple seconds to answer. Just wondering how long it's been since you've worked on your resume. And we'll give that just a second. All right, hopefully that's wrapping up. Okay, great. We'll go ahead and end that. And you want to share the results there. It looks like we've got about 75% of us have done it in the last month, about 13% in the last 3 months, and about 13% it's been longer than a year. And so that's kind of interesting data as well. We're gonna talk about that in just a moment, but just wanted to kind of get an idea of how we're doing and move forward on that. Wanted to cover some things on this that are really important about why a resume is such an important tool. It's going to highlight your education, your work experience, and skills to potential employers. And to highlight your abilities in a clear and concise manner is really important. We're going to use this resume as a selling tool. This is going to be part of your brand that'll outline your skills and your experience. It's also going to entice an employer to want to interview you. You know, when you submit a resume, that is kind of your first connection sometimes with an employer. And if it's not, you know, something that's super stellar or in shape or detail oriented in that first contact, sometimes you won't even get an interview. And so this is why it's really a key part of your career search. Things to keep in mind with your resume, you know, really there should be kind of a master resume. And I tell people, like, a good place to store that might be on Google or something. Make this an ongoing live document. And in this document, you're literally just going to keep adding to all of your experiences. Resume should be live, ongoing documents so that you're always adding on the new experiences that you've learned. You know, every time you're sitting in a class or doing a presentation, or you've completed a project, or you've learned something new at work, every time that happens, you have things to add to your resume. And so you want kind of that ongoing document that you just keep adding to as you go along. It's also important to update it often so that you don't lose memory of skills gained and projects completed. I can't tell you how many times, I've finished a job and then thought a year later, like, oh yeah, what did I do in that job? And what was that thing called? And I can't remember what the acronym actually stood for. And trying to recall that later can be more difficult. So if you keep it going, then you'll find that, you're able to kind of do it in lifetime. So keeping all of that going. The next piece is to customize your resume, to really create a customized resume for each job that you apply to. So you've got that master copy going, and that you're just going to keep adding to. But then you want to, for each new job that you apply to, you're actually going to create and save a new resume PDF for that specific job. You're going to customize it to reflect or mirror the skill sets asked for in that specific job description. So they're asking for, they took the time to craft a job description. Don't just give them a generic resume that forces them to find the skill sets that they're requesting. Take the time to help them out and to show them that you not only have the experience and skills or transferable skills, but also that you are the best candidate because you've gone above and beyond by doing your research and paying attention to their prompt. So it's like, just like when you're taking a test, making sure that you answer that you read the question so that you're able to give the correct answer. It's kind of like that on a job description and submitting a resume. You really don't want to, submit a resume that you used for something else and miss the couple, key skills that they're asking for. You know what you did in a job. And sometimes when you read a job description, oh, I have that skill set, or I did that in my last job, but maybe you didn't quite map it out, in that job description when you were describing it in your ongoing, generic job resume. And so thinking about how to customize it and really make it specific to that job is going to be important. The other thing is to quantify and qualify. Many of you are in MBA programs or finance or financial engineering. Either way, you're in some kind of business field. Use data and metrics to back up your bullet points. You really want to think about things like, how many customers did you help? What percentage increase did you bring about in sales? Over what time period? Give some data and statistics to help back up those bullet points. We'll talk about that more in just a moment, but be thinking more specifically, as you think about those bullet points, of answering the question, so what? Also think about the STAR method, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. And really in your bullet points, focus on action and results in those bullet points. So here's the action that I did, and then here are the tangible, measurable results that came out of that. That's what should be in your bullet points. And then also the length of your resume. We do want to keep it concise. For some of you, you have 20 to 40 years experience, great. Then maybe you're going to spill out onto 2 or 3 pages. But if not, we want to make it concise into 1 page. Now, remember, I told you to have that master resume going. That could be maybe 2 or 3 pages, but the one that you submit is actually going to pull out 3 to 5 key bullet points that are going to reflect what they're asking for in that job on there. So the resume you submit to the company when you apply will only have 3 to 5 bullet points per job. That'll help you kind of narrow it down and bring down the actual full content of the document to 1 page. And we'll talk about some other ways to do that in just a moment, with formatting and also with really thinking about, which experiences really kind of play in with that. So your master copy of your resume might be 2 or 3 pages, but the one you submit probably should stick to 1 page. And remember, as we go along, feel free to, pop questions in the chat if you have them, or write them down, and we'll talk about them at the end, because I definitely want to cover them, because I know there's going to be some as we go along here. All right, as we think about what sections should be on your resume, this is one of those things where everybody, when I first see some of these resumes, everybody's kind of formatting it in a different way. And there are some different camps that say like, oh, you should have a summary at the top, or you should list your education at the top. I'm going to go over the ones that I think are really more standard, business procedures for those who are in the business field. So, if you were applying to be a professor, or you were maybe even in the arts field, some of these sections might be in different categories or like in a different order. But as far as like an MBA or something business related, this is the standard order that I would love to see these resumes in, and that recruiters are going to be looking for. The first one starts with really just your heading, making sure that your name is a little bit larger up at the top. And then your contact information is listed, right in, and these are the three that I recommend: your email address, your phone number, and your LinkedIn URL. These are really going to be kind of the three key things that'll get you, that people are going to be contacting you on. There is no reason to give a physical address anymore. That's kind of something old school. And also, who needs to have that personal information? A lot of you are submitting resumes online. And so I really wouldn't want your personal address to be getting out, into hands that you weren't intending. So take off the address. That's not needed anymore. If there's a specific city and, state that you were wanting to work in, only that area, then maybe you could include that on, like Los Angeles, California or something. But otherwise, you can just leave that off. If you're applying to a position, it's pretty obvious that you want to work in that area. And so putting that information on your resume is not as necessary. You do want to use your LinkedIn URL though. And that is the address where your LinkedIn is. And if you haven't sat through a LinkedIn workshop with us, you can actually shorten that to just your name or something, very specifically and uniquely you. Take off those extra numbers and things that are on the ones that they give you. And I can show you how to do that. But 94% of recruiters and hiring managers during the hiring and interview process are looking at this. I think it's actually higher than this now. It's something like 96 or 98, to like confirm and to back up and make sure that you are who you say you are and that you worked at the places that you said you worked. So definitely making sure that you have those things on there is great. All right. Other things that we're going to want to include, the next section, right at the top of the very first main section is going to be education. And I say this, and again, like I was saying, there's different camps of philosophies for people for what you should put first on your resume. I say to put education first, especially if you're currently in a program, because it's the best thing you've got going for you. And for many of you, you might not even be working a full-time job right now. Maybe you're just working part-time, or it's a kind of, in addition to doing this program. But this is the thing, the main skill set that you are working on and building right now while you're looking for this job and while you're applying. So this should definitely be up at the top. And getting a business degree from the Drucker School is no small thing. And so we want to make sure that we highlight that by putting it up at the top. And so including these sections of education, then the school, then the degree that you actually got, and then also you're going to kind of justify that month and year that the degree was conferred. So you don't put a start and a stop date on your education. Nobody needs to know how long it took you, whether it took you 2 years or 6 years or any of that. They just need to know and want to know, when is the degree conferred? And so if you're not there yet, you might just say expected, or you just say June 2023. And if it's something that passed already, again, you're going to say May 2021. But that's really what you're going to list there, is just the month and the date. And you're going to justify all of the dates on your resume. Additionally, you might put an area of concentration if you have one. If not, then no need to list it. But another thing that you might want to put on here is your GPA, But this says 3.5, but I actually only recommend listing it if it's above 3.7, to be honest. You want to stand out above the crowd. And so if it's not above a 3.7, everybody's gonna be like, okay, great, so you did all right. You know? And so we want to make sure that you stand out. And so if it's above a 3.7, then definitely list that. Sometimes people will also list relevant courses underneath this. I don't think this is necessary for your undergrad degree, but if you feel like maybe you're taking, maybe because you're doing transdisciplinary studies and you also have, you know, some things that you've been taking in the in ICS, or some courses that are going to be really relevant to the job that you're applying to. Maybe you haven't finished your degree yet, but you've already taken, you know, a course that has to do with Excel data and analyzation. Then you want to list that, you know, right there, because maybe you don't have that work experience yet, but you have just completed a course and projects that are included with that. But relevant coursework is not necessary. It could just be an added bonus. So something to think about as well. But your education will be there, and it'll be in reverse chronological order. So your master's degree, and then you go backwards to your bachelor's degree next. All right, next up comes your work experience. And this work experience could be paid or unpaid, full-time or part-time, but it would be at a company of sorts, and you're going to have some bullet points to list under it. We're going to reserve the volunteer work unless it's something that's going to be related to where you want to go. So for instance, what I'm going to talk about is for instance, during the pandemic, many of you know, I started studying and learned about wine. One of the things that I did in order to get myself some experience in that area was I volunteered for a little while at a wine shop. And so I listed that as, I told them, I will volunteer here if you let me put this on my resume as work experience. And that was an agreement that we had. And so I was able to do that. Now, eventually they ended up hiring me and paying me to do it, obviously, because I had some wine training and knowledge. But in order to do that, I was able to list on there that I've worked at, this wine shop, and here's where I'm at. If it applies to a job that you're applying to, then I would list it. But otherwise, it's going to be your actual work experience. We'll talk about volunteer and leadership type opportunities in a moment. But for now, we're just going to look at work experience. Okay, again, we're listing these in reverse chronological order. So you're going to list the most recent things first. You're going to, on these things, you're going to start with the company name. And then right under that, you're going to have a title, and you're going to list the location. And then maybe you have the month and the year. Now you could even put the location on the left side, left justify, and only put the dates on the right justification. Sometimes that's a little bit cleaner look as well. Maybe you have the company name, comma, city and state, and then the next line you have your job title and just the dates. That also is helpful in case you had more than one position at a particular organization, because then you just have the organization name, and then underneath there you have the position title with dates, and then maybe you have another position title with dates because you got a promotion, or you were working in a different area or department, but still at that same organization. The next thing you're going to do is list out your bullet points. And like I said, you're going to have 3 to 5. Now remember, on your master copy, maybe you've got 10, but you're going to narrow it down to those 3 to 5 for the ones that you submit online. And here you're really going to just start putting in action and result. I do have a handout that I'm going to give you at the end, but also we'll go over it in just a moment, that has some lists of action verbs. A couple of things I wanted to say about those is this. A lot of times when we're putting down these action verbs, we'll use the either present tense for the jobs that we're in right now and past tense for the previous ones. What I want to say about that is keep them all in present tense. All of the verbs on your entire document in present tense. Here's why. It saves on space because you get rid of the ed and ing and all of the things that follow, but also it keeps the document current. That master copy will all stay current. So you don't have to keep going in and updating like, oh, okay, now I got to change all the verbs back to present, to past tense, because now I'm not doing that job anymore. Keep them all present tense, and then you don't ever have to change them. The other thing is to use a thesaurus so that you don't keep using the same verbiage, and you show some complex vocabulary use for each bullet point. And again, I'll show you some examples in the next slide, but you don't want to say, 5 bullet points that show that you managed this and you managed that and you managed another. You want to kind of change up those action verbs and think about different parts of what you did while you were managing. Maybe even think about how the job description itself, what they're asking for. And I've said this to many of you before, but maybe in the job description that you're reading, they're asking for someone with supervisory experience. Now, that when you say, I managed this many people, that should be implied. But I'm going to say, if you want to get through those AI searches, use the exact word, supervised 5 employees. If that's what they're asking for, is supervise, then that's what you put on your resume. Your master document might say manage, but maybe when you go to submit it, you change that verb to something that matches what it is they're looking for. I hope that makes sense. Also, each bullet point should cover that action and result, like I mentioned. You're going to focus on accomplishments and skills. You're not just going to regurgitate what the job description was when you got hired. You're really going to think about, what did I do, in that job, and what were the key things that I covered? And again, thinking about what they're asking for in a job description, which ones of those things did I do, but maybe wasn't a main part of what they listed as the job description, but I know I did, and here's how I did it. Here's the action and result bullet point that goes with it. And you're going to quantify those results, again, using metrics and data, suggesting 3 to 5 bullet points, only what's important, and that maybe have more on that master copy. One more thing is this, and that is that no punctuation is needed at the end of each of these bullet points. You'll notice there are no periods or exclamation points or anything at the end of these sentences. Now, if they need commas within, fine, but not at the end. These are not full sentences, and they're not intended to be. It's just going to be like a phrase about what you did in that job. I'm going to pause right there, actually, and just ask, as we look at this list of action verbs, if there are any questions so far. You can either raise your hand or you can take yourself off mute.
Ms. Packers, quick question. Where can we find this page of action verbs so we can always have it on hand and refer to?
Sure. Great question. I'm actually going to send this to you after we're finished with this workshop. But also there is a list that is in Handshake under the resources tab on the left. If you click on that resources tab, there is an action verbs handout there for you. You can also find it on this site, which is resumebear.com. A lot of times you can even find additional lists just by Googling. Great question, though.
Cindy?
Yes.
So one of the things that I had also found pretty useful, because I actually work in career services too,
Yeah.
was something called ONET Online.
Mm-hmm.
And on ONET Online, they actually have a lot of really awesome job duties that are associated with very specific technical trades. So maybe people that are trying to get into more engineering positions or things of that nature. I love your tips, by the way. I'm definitely going to take these home. But I was also wondering what your thoughts are on using those pretty much verbatim for more technical trades, for instance, maybe an electrical trainee or a helper, things that have those very specific job duties in their job postings.
Yes. And
then just kind of transferring those over to the resume in short bullet points.
Yes, that would be really helpful. A lot of times, and I tell people this, I'm not studying financial engineering right now. You guys are. So you know what the skills and tasks that you've done and what the abilities are. So make sure that you're studying up on the things that you should do. Also, again, pay attention to what they list in the job description for the job that you are applying, because those are the things they're asking for. So make sure that you regurgitate that on your resume, that you've done them and where, in which places you've done them. Was it on a project you were working on or in a job? And show those things directly. Like, don't make them have to work for it. Show it. Great questions. All right. And I see another hand raised, Aubrey.
How do you best list independent contracting work when you haven't actually been an employee, but
Sure. So you can actually list, and I've seen it this way a few times recently, where they'll list like Microsoft, and then in parentheses next to it, they'll say contract. So maybe you worked for another company, but you were contracted by Microsoft, or you were contracted by Amazon, or whoever it is, but you weren't necessarily, they weren't hired by, you weren't hired by them directly. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. So they'll list the company and then list it in a parentheses contract. Any other questions on bullet points before we move on? All right, STAR format. We're going to talk more about this in the interviews workshop we're doing next in 2 weeks. But when you're on your resume, you also want to be thinking about this STAR format: situation, task, action, result. Now, on a resume, you don't really need to focus so much on the situation and task, but you do need to think about action and result. What did you do and what was the result? How do you answer the question, so what? And I'm going to simplify this, really mildly, and just say, you're not going to just say filed documents in the filing cabinet. You're going to say more about that. You're going to say created an organizational system, in for live documents, which decreased the, finding time or something, on it by 25%, because you're going to say something about, so what, you filed documents, anybody can do that. What they want to know is, how did you make that better? How'd you go above and beyond? What are you bringing to this particular thing that we're asking for when we ask someone to provide office organization? And again, this is a simple task and skill, but you kind of get what I'm saying on this, that they want to know more about the details of how you did it, what you did, and what was the result, which resulted in 25% more, increase in customer satisfaction, or, this many return customers as a result. And so those kind of things. So really be thinking about action and result, the so what question. All right. As you think about these ATS or AI systems, more and more companies are using applicant tracking systems to sift through their resumes. And if your resume doesn't have the keywords or skills the ATS is looking for, then it won't even be seen. A lot of times, especially when you're applying for jobs online and on LinkedIn, and this is also why I tell you to reach out to recruiters directly, or to at least try to find somebody who works at the company that can network for you and can submit your resume to the right people. But a lot of times when you're applying on either online or on LinkedIn, there might be 300 or 500 applications being put in. How do you think yours is going to stand out, and why? One of the ways is that, again, whatever they're asking for, make sure your action words and your keywords match, and that those things show up that they're looking for, because this is how they're doing things these days. Really, they're looking for those keywords and skills, and so this is why it is just vital that you scour through the job description when you're applying to positions and really cater your resume for each one specifically. Some hiring managers will only read and view the ones that they get handed by the ATS system and that search. So it's going to sift it through, spit out just a couple, and then those are going to be the ones that get read. And so we want to make sure. And if you have any question, we're here to help. So let us know. tips for kind of that ATS formatting, again, using that simple black and white MBA template that I give kind of all students, but this is the one you want to use to submit online. Now, if you're in an arts career or you're in a marketing profession and you want to show something a little more creative, maybe that's a second version that you create. But the first one should be the simple black and white copy in order to get through those AI systems. One that lists those words, one that has all of the things that are on there, that doesn't overuse keywords, that's really honest and truthful, but also is in a format, not columns, but it's just lists of things that you've done with results. Hoping all that makes sense. We're going to switch over to cover letters, but before we do that, I want to ask if there's any other questions on resumes before we move on. Okay, well, we'll have some time at the end too, so hang on to your question. Alicia, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find to raise my hand.
That's
quick enough.
okay. That's okay. Feel free to unmute, guys. There's not that many of us on here where it's okay to just unmute and ask your question.
So I know that earlier you said, you may have been doing in this profession or in profession for longer time. And I think it's good for me to know, but I also have students that ask, so I want to know your opinion on it, is when should you drop some things from your resume? So like if you, if you started out and you didn't have experience and you were a babysitter and you put that on there and now you're getting your MBA, when do you start to drop the things that are not relevant, but doesn't make it look bare?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Again, you want to think about what they're asking for. So if you're applying for a job that is looking for a financial analyst, babysitting is not going to be a valuable skill for them. And so while it might have been great to put on your application when you were applying to be a barista or you were applying to come to college to show that you had responsibility, right now, that's not going to be one. And that's a very, again, simplistic example. But as you look at your resume, again, trying to pare it down to one page, that might help you with thinking about which jobs on here are not necessarily relevant to the skill set and experience that they're looking for this job. That's part of how you pare it down. The other one is if there's any major gaps on there. So if you spent 4 years at university and you weren't working during that time, but you were working before that, and then you were looking for a job now, there's, space for that. LinkedIn has like a thing that you can put on there now saying like 4 years pursuing education, but your resume doesn't always have that. And so not wanting to show like huge gaps on there that aren't answered for. But also, if you were working something that was totally different, to again, try to pull out those skill sets that you were practicing during that time that might be transferable skills on there. So maybe it wasn't like that was the exact job, experience that they were looking for, but maybe you were learning some things there that would have been helpful. An example of this that I'm going to give is when I went to work at Amazon, I had never done logistics or, any kind of warehouse work before, and I was supervising 650 employees, going into this new job. And so how could I show that? Well, what they found valuable was that while I wasn't, and they found it as a transferable skill, was that I wasn't necessarily in the logistics of delivery, but I was working in the logistics of student engagement and programming and events and making sure that students were at different locations and that things got there. And so finding ways to show that I was actually doing that I was overseeing, 120 students at a time, and, that they all had different locations and tasks, and kind of my logistical management experience, that I was learning during that time was transferable. So I wouldn't just eliminate, that part from the resume. But as you go back over time, let's say you've got 5 jobs that are, or just 3 jobs that are relevant. And then, but you have 20 years of experience. I'm not going to go back and show like all of my very first jobs. I'm just going to pull up the last 10 years or so, 15 years maybe. No need to go back to the beginning of time when I had my first job, or, I was working at McDonald's or whatever it was, right? You're just trying to show that like during the last, this block of time, 10 to 15 years, here's what I've been doing to work towards the skills that are needed for this job. Does that answer that question? Great. All right. Oh, Ben, did you have one too?
I sure do. Thank you. I wanted to ask 2 questions, and I'm just trying to figure out how to unraise my hand.
That's okay.
Okay. I'm on my phone and it's different. You said only to list 3 to 5 bullets under each employer. In sales, when you have a lot of different accomplishments and things like that, that's really challenging to do.
Right.
One of the things that I did was I created a separate section called achievements.
Yeah.
And I listed them in there. So is that, it sounds like that's something you vote for, or is there some other way to do it?
Definitely. And we I didn't cover it on there, but one of the things is that the other sections to include. So you've got your work experience, then maybe you have a section called leadership and volunteer experience. And then maybe you have a section that is called certifications and training. And that can include some, training or awards, and things that you got while you were at a specific job. You can include those in other sections. Your last section should be skill sets. That's kind of your ta-da of what you end with, the skill sets at the end. And so those are all
Okay.
places that you can add some additional things for sure.
And then I also, thank you. I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about the applicant tracking system, and you were talking about using words that are in the posting in the resume, do those, if you're only doing 3 to 5 bullets, then those words can't reappear too much, but that still gives you the traction you need?
Say the question again.
So I was thinking with ATS that not only do you have to use the right words, but they have to have a frequency. They have to have a certain number of times that they're used. And I'm just wondering, if you're paring things down so much, are you losing your opportunity for that frequency?
Not necessarily, no. Because it doesn't need to be in there. You don't want it to be in there too many times, because that can also work against you. But you could relist it, like, again, under skill sets at the bottom. That would be a place where you could relist for a second time. I think 2 to 3 times is usually the goal.
Okay.
And so it's not like a huge number or anything. Yeah.
And speaking about the skill sets, is there a place where there's a list of skill sets? I know LinkedIn has a list that you can choose from.
Yeah.
Is there another place to go that you recommend so that we can make sure we...
Sure. You can Google online, but again, remember, you're going to scour that particular job description. Another trick that I say is good is to, scout LinkedIn and, stalk other people who maybe have that position and see what skill sets they have, because sometimes that's helpful to figure out, like, what have they done? And is that something I need to, either learn or, oh yeah, I have that too, put that on there. So that's another way you can find those.
Awesome. Thank you.
Questions. Thanks so much. All right, let's move on to cover letters. And again, we'll have some time at the end, but I'm going to send you templates of both of these. But 83% of HR professionals include your cover letter in their hiring decision. And so those who have cover letters stand out because not everyone submits them. Do your research and really make sure that your cover letter is matching the specific job that you're applying to for that company. Some of the things that you can do is make sure on your cover letter, you've got your contact details, a greeting, the body, the opening part of, who you are and why you're going to be a great fit, your accomplishments. but also a great closing. Now, what is it about this particular company that attracts you? That's a question you need to be asking. And what is it about the job, specifically this job, that excites you? Ask these questions before you apply. And how do you, as an individual, bring value? And how is that unique? When you kind of narrow down those 4 questions, that will help you to decide like what's going to be in the content. And again, you're going to have your contact info and professional business opening section for them. You're going to make it personal by not just addressing to whom it may concern, but you're going to say dear, and then you list the boss's name, or the name of the head of the department, or maybe it's just going to be the name of the department manager, or the name of the recruiter if you have it. Whatever this company is calling their recruiting team or department. Sometimes they call it talent acquisition or recruiting department. Maybe it's a hiring manager that you've found out about. Whenever you have this information, it's really helpful to put it on there to personalize. The next piece is like your first paragraph. And again, I'm going to send you a template for all of this. You don't have to write it down. And I'm also going to send you this PowerPoint. But what do you know about the company? Why are you applying for this job? What value can you bring to the company? All those things should be in that very first paragraph. Really talk about them. I always say like sandwich it. Talk about them, talk about you, end with them, and wish them well. That's kind of the key, format to a cover letter. Talk about them, talk about you, and then talk about them and wish them well. This first paragraph, we're going to talk about them. What do you know about them? What's attracted you to apply? And how does it align with your mission and values? The next thing is going to be in that second paragraph, maybe you're going to tell some story of a project that you worked on where you knocked it out of the park, or really like where you're showcasing the skill set that they're asking for. Do that in the second paragraph. Tell some kind of story that pulls them in and that makes them want to hire you for your, project management, or your leadership that you took in this role, or maybe it was kind of the ways that you went above and beyond. Really do that in the second paragraph. And then in the third paragraph, really the concluding paragraph, you're just going to reiterate your interest in the role. You're going to include some kind of call to action. I'm excited to talk about what value I can bring to XYZ company, and I'm available by phone to discuss this further. And maybe wish them well in their search. I know, searches can be difficult. Hoping that you're going to find just the right person that's going to help you to, make this role great. Show some interest in their team. And again, don't ever forget to leave with some kind of sincerely or respectfully, or, truly yours, and your name. A nice conclusion there. All right, I've covered a lot. Again, any other questions about resumes or cover letters that I can answer before I share some closing information?
Yes, Cindy, I have a question about when a candidate has, you touched on this, but when a candidate has very little to no experience and they list things like, I am a stay-at-home mom or something of that nature, and it isn't paid experience. I actually had someone put in that they were a housemaker or independent contractor and listed that childcare as part of their professional experience. Can you tell me what your thoughts are on something like that? Is that something they should even list on the resume?
I mean, if for some reason there's a huge gap, you might want to mention it, in the beginning. Maybe it's in your cover letter that you mention it and you say, while I dedicated, the last 10 years to, to our family and some needs that we had at home, during that time, I was also, learning management skills here, or I was also, find some way to like kind of fill in the gap, just so that they're aware. I mean, everybody knows, and that's why they have those sections on LinkedIn now where you can say that. But a cover letter might be a better place to kind of address that. I don't,
That's
no need to like come up with some fancy, like, executive home management,
Yes,
manager. Don't make
yes.
up positions like that, because that just makes everybody look silly. And it kind of, makes the position itself. I mean, that's a high calling to be home and to be taking care of kids. So don't try to, make it cutesy or whatever. It's like, no, you were working hard. So
Thank you. That's a
yeah.
great suggestion. I appreciate that.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Yeah, I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
This is not exactly about a cover letter, but it's about when, like, for example, I submitted a resume with a cover letter, and then I had a phone screen, and then they decided I'm not available to start when they needed somebody, so they weren't sure if they would even let me begin the rest of the interview process. And now I'd like to follow up with them because I haven't heard from them. So is there a way that's better to do that other than just kind of winging it?
It's always okay to check back in and just say, hi, so-and-so, just wanted to check in and let you know I'm still interested in this position. Would love to get an update, hoping the best for you and your team as you're completing your search. Just to let them know, like, you're still interested, but also would love, some details on where they're at.
Okay, then that's what I was going to do. Thank you, Elisa. That's very kind.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'll do then. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right, well, I did want to let you know as we close out here, we are available, Deborah and I, to help with one-on-one coaching for any of these or all of these things at any time. Feel free to hop on Handshake. I'll give you the link in just a moment. Make an appointment with us, or just email us, or stop by our offices. Also to connect on LinkedIn, and we'd love to kind of walk you through some tips and tricks, for how to job search, but also really important networking and setting up your LinkedIn account. It can be, like I said, that kind of backup to your resume. Workshops and events like the ones that you're attending today, and the newsletter. If you're not part of our, if you have not been getting our newsletter, it comes every other week. Please let us know, because we want to make sure you're on the list. But if you are, please be sure to read them. There's all kinds of jobs. There's resume, cover letter tips in there. There's all kinds of other search tips. And you get to see which students and alumni have recently obtained new jobs and internships, which is an exciting thing, because then you can find out which companies love to hire Drucker people, right? And where students and alumni are going. Lastly, if you're not part of the LinkedIn group for Drucker Career Strategy, be sure to hop on that as well. We actually post daily positions, jobs, and internships on there, and other helpful tips every day. There's something posted on there for you. So be sure to check that out as well. All right, if you want to make a one-on-one appointment, feel free to scan this, or just go on Handshake and select the Drucker options for making an appointment with Deborah or myself at a time that works for you. And lastly, like I said, coming up in 2 weeks, we're doing an interview skills workshop, Foundations 1, and we're going to go through some of the key items that you're going to need to interview, including STAR method and how to answer behavioral questions, and how to even pursue internships and jobs at this point in the semester and your career. But also some other great questions will be answered there as well. So be sure to join us for that in 2 weeks. And lastly, just kind of some other information on where we got this information for this workshop. But again, I will send you this PowerPoint and also some additional items like the resume and cover letter template and that action verbs list that you asked for. Feel free to let me know if there's anything else that we can help with. We are here to help you guys, so let us know. And yeah, thanks so much for your time today. I'm going to give you just a few minutes back. We so appreciate you guys joining us.